So for this tour we find ourselves in a helicopter over Bungendore, southern New South Wales, east of Canberra, and what we'll be doing today is surveying the old railway line from Bungendore to Captain's Flat, which has been unused for many years, but presents a great opportunity for a multi-purpose recreation trail to be set up through some quite scenic country. Now, unlike other similar repurposed rail trails, this one can't leave from the town itself because the turn-off on the Captain's Flat part of the railway is a few kilometres outside town, so just initially there would have to be some sort of access via the roadway or a path built alongside the roadway to meet up with the spur line where it first crosses the roadway, which is probably around, at a guess, 3 kilometres out of town. But it's a fairly quiet road, and there's probably enough room there for a some sort of verge or something. And now this is where the main Canberra to Bungendore railway line is crossed by the road to Hoskins Town. So on the right is where the railway line runs, and what we are following is the main Bungendore to Hoskins Town road, which does also go to Captain's Flat as well. So initially planning would have to be around the access to the start point of the actual rail recreational path. Anyway, we'll break off from the road just for a moment and we'll fly over to where the junction of the Captain's Flat line is, and as you can see just in front now, you can see the spur line to Captain's Flat, the abandoned railway line to Captain's Flat, branching off from the main line. And travelling through some nice flat country, and as you can see up ahead, another kilometre or two away, it crosses the roadway to Hoskins Town, so we'll go and have a look at that. Get ourselves back on the roadway, which would be initial access anyway, unless they decided to somehow make a whole new access point. So this is where the spur line, the railway line, crosses the Hoskins Town road and almost follows it on the left for a little while. So on the left is the railway and on the right is the Hoskins Town road. And as you can see, the corridor is still quite legibly marked. It's quite obvious in the landscape still, even having been closed for I don't know, 50, 60, 70 years. Nice flat country, perfect for cycling purposes if it ever ends up being a cycleway. Travelling through some nice flat paddocks. And over to the east, which is to the left, is a nice range of mountains as a backdrop. And over to the right, which we didn't look at, is another small range, which we will just see. Yes, it's the Karwoola area just near Queanbeyan. And what we've done here is we'll leave the railway corridor for a little while, and we'll just go and inspect the major landmark in this area, which is the Mills Cross Radio Telescope, which has arms, I think, 2 kilometres long. So anyway, it's an extreme, from the air it's a very obvious point to recognise in the landscape, and visible from the trail as users trundle past. There's the ranges to the east, the Pallarang Ranges. It's also a very nice place to get into and recreationalise, as they say. So once again we're joining the rail trail, the railway line. Once again it crosses the Hoskins Town Road. By the way, this is basically pretty well due south, the direction that this trail takes. And we're just getting through some more nice, reasonably flat country, grazing land, pretty sparsely populated. Various roads leading off to farms and fire trails up in the mountains to the left, which can be explored as well. Somebody's private racetrack there from the look of it. And we're getting fairly close to Hoskins Town, which is the main settlement between Bungendore and Captain's Flat. Population of maybe 50, but yes, it's pretty sparsely populated country around here. And we're just about to cross the main road from Queanbeyan to Hoskins Town, which comes in just ahead there. That's also another good starting point for any recreation activities along this trail. As you can see, the rail line passes just to the side of Hoskins Town, and as you can see, Hoskins Town's just a sort of a spread out community, but still enough of a community to be considered a village or something similar. And as we come around west of the main intersection, we can see off to the left there that the road heading towards the hills, that's a direct way over the mountains over to Braidwood, which is also about 25 kilometres, 30 kilometres, a very nice cycling distance as well. So now, after Hoskins Town, we can see that the rail line follows quite closely with the gravel road, which is also used to get to Captain's Flat. A bit further up it actually joins the main Queanbeyan to Captain's Flat tar asphalt road, but the rail trail takes a different path at that point. So as you can see, the countryside is still basically very lightly populated. Some pretty scrubby country from the look of it, going into nicely pasture improved. So that's where the main gravel road just heads off to the east a bit, while the railway line continues on quite straight through here, past the great big dam and some forested areas. Should be a nice scenic part of the ride, I guess. and then skirts around the western side of the small hill. More a bump in the landscape than a hill, but anyway. And onto the river flats of the Molonglo River, I think it is. Yeah, I think that's the Molonglo River that runs through there. Anyway, it's a bit of a bone of contention, that river, because Captain's Flat was a mining town, and quite a lot of heavy metals and other pollutants carried downstream, and the whole landscape here is considered a little bit polluted from those old metals, and even 50 years of remedial work has only sort of dented the surface of what damage was done. But as far as the effect it might have on a recreational trail, I don't think it would be much, because it's basically mostly to do with the riverbed. Some of the soil that's underneath the railway lines apparently is also affected, but nothing that can't be fixed in the long run. And as you can see, we're crossing over the dirt road again, and as you can see, the bridge there is shown as a normal concrete span, but in actual fact, in real life, it's a beautiful white trestle bridge to add some character to the landscape. So now the rail line is on the left and the road is on the right, and you can see that the road goes and joins the main Queanbeyan to Captain's Flat tar road just there, while the railway line carries on just to the east of that road. Gets very close actually at certain points. At a guess, I'd say we're probably 20 to 30 k's still to go to Captain's Flat. This is Foxlow cattle stud is all this land here, one of the great original properties in the region. And while the highway continues off to the right, the railway line makes a detour to the left, closer to the river. There'd be some beautiful river views coming up as it heads along this part of the scenery. Once again, I think that's the Molonglo River. Looks beautiful in the scenery, doesn't it? Don't know if it's that blue and that wide in real life, but the idea is there. So skirting along the bottom of the hills on the river flats. There'd be a little bit of up and down here, but still relatively flat travelling for if it does become a rail trail. And just meandering left and right a bit to bypass little hills and rises in the landscape. Always nice and close to the river. And now we leave the river and get close to the highway again, and we start to enter the forested part of the ride. So this is sort of semi-open country here at the moment. You see the trees are building up somewhat. And the trail's probably a little bit undulating at this stage of the trip. Now we cross over the main Queanbeyan to Captain's Flat highway again and carry on the western side of the highway now. And after a couple of paddocks, the line then enters the eucalypt forest, which it pretty well stays in until we get to Captain's Flat, which would only be another 5 k's up the valley there. As you can see, though, none of the topography is particularly steep, or it's basically a fairly flat run the whole way from Bungendore. A nice easy passage if it ever gets developed. Well, optimistically we'll say when it gets developed. It's a little bit hard to pick out at this stage in amongst the trees, but it sort of does follow the contours of the landscape close to the actual tar road there. Swings around that little ridge there. Over a built-up section in that little valley. Forest on each side, so you probably would hardly even hear the cars on the highway, and most of the time, except for rush hour, there's probably only a few cars an hour running along that road. So, very quiet, peaceful part of the world, Captain's Flat. Once again, following the path of least resistance close to the highway. Through the beautiful, well, dry gum tree forests in this part of the world. Now we're starting to enter the actual area of Captain's Flat. Still running along very close to the road. And we're just about to arrive. That bare hill in the foreground there is part of the old Captain's Flat mining operations. There used to be a whole lot more bare ground, but they've managed to revegetate some of the old mine tailings and stuff. So directly under us now is the old Captain's Flat station. And then there's a nice little access road through the old mine site down to Captain's Flat Village, which is just coming into view now, with its dam above it and the Molonglo River running through town. And just about to go over the top of the Captain's Flat pub. Beautiful old building. It's not actually modelled in this scenery. And we'll just go for a quick look at the rest of Captain's Flat before we sit down. Very long, skinny town, because it's surrounded by quite steep hills everywhere, so building has to be in a confined sort of valley. And if you look in the distance, that valley there heading off into the haze is the valley that we just travelled up. So we've reached the end of Captain's Flat itself now. We'll turn around at the top end, or bottom end, not sure which it is. I guess it's the bottom end of town. can see the valley that we came up and the mountains, quite steep hills and mountains behind it. And that bare patch is the old mine site, which we'll go and have a look at before we land on the town park. But there's a fair bit to do around Captain's Flat. There's lots and lots of fire trails for cyclists, mountain bikers to explore. There's various walking trails. There's the dam at the top end of town, which is could be used for recreation. There's a fantastic pub with, I don't know if it still is, but it certainly used to have the longest bar in the southern hemisphere. Very convivial atmosphere there now, with the new owners adding a bit of life to the place. And as we come over the top of the old mine site, there's a couple of old mining structures there that's interesting to visit as well. Good day trip from Canberra if you're driving, and a good 2-day trip from Canberra or nearby, certainly from Bungendore anyway, if you're cycling. So there you go, that's the summary of the Bungendore to Captain's Flat rail corridor, which, fingers crossed, hopefully people can see the potential, so close to Canberra and within a couple of 3 hours of Sydney, for a multi-purpose recreational trail. Primarily, I guess, a cycle rail trail, but could be any number of users: walkers, horse riders, you name it. Right, well there we go. Set this thing down if we can. Ooh, a bit of a wild landing, but anyway, we're down safe. That's the main thing. Right, off to the pub to go and get a beer. See ya.